So our next guest is Eduardo Mendoza. Ed is the director of the Office of Advising and Academic Services at California State University San Bernardino. Ed has been working in academic advising for the past 15 years and as the director of advising academic services for the past 6 years. Some of the programs that the office coordinates are advising for undeclared students, graduation pledge programs, students on academic probation, students with excessive units, and most recently, advising all first-year students. Ed earned his BA in administration with a concentration in finance in 2003 and his master's in public administration in 2007, both from CSUSB. Ed enjoys traveling with his wife, mainly to find great places to eat, and I would say is a foodie and world traveler. Ed has also raises many dogs, but also says that his wife is the one that brings them home and that they rescue. So, Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, well, I know it's a long time coming, especially because you're my boss. And so I've been looking to have you on this podcast for a while. So I'm glad everything has worked out with both our schedules to make this happen. So can you talk to listeners about your path into higher ed and academic advising?
I can. It might be similar to some, it might be different from some, but my path was I attended as a first generation college student. I started college at California State University, San Bernardino. I wanted to be an architect. Thought, okay, I'll just do my GEs here and then transfer to a local university that has architecture since CSUSB did not. But as I got involved, as I got connected, as I felt like the university was part of me in a way, I decided to change my major and I chose admin finance concentration. I was always good with math. I was always good with numbers, and I figured something like that in the future. And my dream was when I switched my major to finance, someday I'm going to go live in New York because that's where finance is. That's where the financial market is. And I always thought of New York. And if you can, well, for those listeners, in my office, I have a picture of New York that I've had for many years because that was always a dream location of mine, career-wise, but then also travel. And as Matt mentioned, I love a lot of food. So all the food places I can find in New York. But as I was a student here, I took the scenic route, is how I say it, to graduation. I didn't graduate in 4 years. I didn't graduate in 5 years. I graduated in 6+ years. And that, I think, made me understand what I really want to do. If I would have graduated in 4 years, which probably would have been a good thing, I don't know if I would be doing what I'm doing now. Reason it took me a little longer, obviously the change of major, but also because I got really involved with school in terms of student government, organizations, student union board, and that alone made me or introduced me to administration on campus. I got to be in meetings with the president, be in meetings with vice president, and I said to myself then, they seem to have a nice job. They go to meetings, get paid good money, working on a college campus. What could be better than that? So I said, how can I figure out a way to work on a college campus and not have to take classes anymore? Because I wasn't always a fan of classes. Matt knows me for a long time here. I was probably that student that probably didn't buy the books all the time. School came rather easy at times, and I did enough to get by. Looking back, I don't regret it, but looking back, maybe I could have done things differently in terms of pushing myself more in those senses. But that made me want to work at a university. I was more on the student affairs side, working at the rec center, like I said, the student government. But the first office that gave me an opportunity to work on campus was the admissions office. And working in admissions, understanding what students needed to do to come to our university, and then becoming a recruiter, going out to community colleges, going out to high schools, and not only talking about our university, but talking about college in our community as a whole was important to me. Going to classes that, instead of the avid classes, instead of the classes where students talk about college all the time, going to some ESL classes, going to other students who probably weren't thinking of college or university. And it was important for me to connect with those students, especially because I saw myself in them in terms of first generation, in terms of not only first generation college, but first generation in the United States. That was important to me. So I enjoyed the recruitment part of it. I was really advising students on what to do to transfer to apply to the university. An opportunity came up in the advising office. I applied, I got it, and I've been here for 15 years. And I can't see myself going anywhere else. I could really see myself retiring in this position.
Yeah, because sometimes there's the thought of, well, you should work at multiple places, like different institutions, and a lot of your higher ed experience has really just been CSUSB. But you've worked in admissions, worked in advising, you've had different positions: evaluator, recruiter, director, or academic success coordinator, and then director. What do you think about that kind of thought of, if you stay at the one place, maybe you're not opening the doors for other opportunities, or maybe you don't need to?
I have heard that, and I've even heard it as extreme of, I'm too scared to cut the umbilical cord because I went to school here, I work here, this is the only university I know. But at the same time, I find a purpose at this school. I find a reason to improve. I know the CSU as a whole, not just San Bernardino, is how do we improve our graduation numbers and what role I can play in that. Right now, a focus is on equity gaps and what role can I play in that. So there's always a new challenge. And not only that, sometimes it feels like a different university when there's different bosses often, or when there's different presidents and the leadership is different. It's an adjustment all the time. So I can't see myself at another school. One of the benefits that I think we've had here in California, and Matt, here, you and I have had the privilege of being on the steering committee for the California Collaborative, the CalCAN now, which stands for California Counselors Academic Advising Network that we're doing with NACADA. That allows me to connect with those other university folks, whether at different CSUs or UCs or community college, and kind of hear from them and what they're experiencing and how to connect with them. With this whole associate's degree for transfer students that we have here in California, I think we're going to have more opportunity to work with community colleges. So it's an easier transition for students from the community college transferring to a four-year university, and make sure their graduation isn't delayed because our different course numberings or our different policies that we have amongst the schools. So I have heard the saying you mentioned about working at multiple locations, but after what's now 17 years working in higher ed, not 1 year has been the same. One of the things I forgot to write on my bio, one of the things that we've coordinated over all these years has been orientation for all incoming students. And not one single orientation has ever been the same from year to year. So I appreciate that. At the same time, it also gives me gray hairs. But there's nothing can be perfect. It's a nice balance between the positives of everything and the negatives of everything.
Yeah, and one of the things I think for you, it's like you can teach anyone the skills to do a job, but you can't teach someone to be a human being. And I think for you, like your personality, you connect so much with people, which I think was what was great about you being a recruiter, but then also getting to move to advising academic services as an advisor and then as a director. You still have that interaction with students that, in this case, you can kind of see their growth from the time they start until when they graduate, in most cases. And I guess with that, that's something I've always appreciated about you, but also jealous at the same time, because I know when I first started in this, we worked in admissions together, but I was a student assistant at the time. But then when I started working here in advising academic services, students would come in and be like, "Can I meet with Ed?" "Oh, but Matt's available, or this other advisor's available." "Well, I don't want to see them. I want to see Ed because Ed's nice. Ed's helped me." And then it's like, can't we just get a chance to talk with the student? But you made those connections, and it's really shown through those years.
And that comes back to a quote that I've always said, and you've heard me say this, and it kind of applies in so many different areas of our lives. Maya Angelou said, "People may not remember what you said, people may not remember what you did, but people will always remember how you made them feel." And that's so important to me. Like I said, being in the shoes of first gen, not only university, but in the country. And we talk about it more and more now. I don't know if this topic was big 15 years ago, but the connection that students need to feel to university so that we can retain them, so they can graduate. That connection is so important. And I always, and this is thanks to my parents, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. Be friendly. People get upset when they don't understand something. So if we could just explain things to them, not many students get upset. I mean, it might happen still, but if you explain things to them in a way that they can understand it, they leave happy. They leave like they've been heard, and they'll come back. I mean, but over the years, to go back to your comment of they would ask for Ed, to go back now there's many students asking for Matt, right? Now there's many students asking for all the advisors. And it's not that you're better, but that's who they met with. And then the other advisors as well. As you know, we're fortunate to work with the folks we work in our office because everyone's great. Everyone has their unique style of advising and their own connection with students, but and every student's different. So one of the things that we do in our office, and maybe you have a question about this later, so I apologize if I'm jumping ahead or not. We have a advising center kind of approach. Instead of you, Matt, you only see these majors, or instead of you, Matt, you only see this alphabet. When students come in, they can meet with any one of us. Because what if they already have a connection with Matt, and then they change their major? I want them to keep that connection with Matt. Or what if they have a connection with John or Saul or any of the other advisors? It's important that we are available because every student is different. They're going to find their connection, not only with a staff advisor, but we have wonderful peer advisors as well, right? That they might find a connection with them. So I don't even know if that was a question or I answered a question, but hey, I'm glad we talked about that piece.
Yeah, no. I like the way this was going. And I think this definitely leads into this next question, which is, what does advising and academic services do? You mentioned a little bit in your bio, and it seems like it's an all services rendered office. Like we literally can meet any student, any first year student is going to have some sort of contact with our office, whether they start here at the university or at some point during their time at the university. So I guess, can you talk more about what advising academic services does, and why do we have all of these different programs? How do we make it happen?
And for those that know me, I always like to give the extra information because people know where it comes from, the history behind it. At CSUSB, our university was founded in 1965. Our previous director, before I took on the director role, he retired. He got hired here in 1989 as a director of advising. That's the first time we had advising really on our campus. We've always had faculty, of course. We've always had faculty being able to guide students and guide them to graduation, but to hire professionals to focus on advising at our school was like 1989. And I remember some of the things they had going to Nakata back in the early 90s and learning more from it and coming back and being able to create new programs like probation. Before, in the early 90s, when you met with students who were below 2.0, that was considered early intervention because students normally didn't come until they were at a point of dismissal or disqualification. But for us to start meeting with them as soon as they fell below 2.0, that was considered early intervention. And I believe some schools still have the process of when you fall below a 2.0 for the first time, you do something online or you fill out a form or you submit something online, where we've always met with the students one-on-one. We were the only advising office on campus. So therefore, everything advising fell to the one office. There were students on probation, probably in the early 2000s. Why don't we create a graduation pledge program? If students are willing to commit to graduating in 4 years, how about we help them in that process, eliminate some of the barriers, monitor them a little bit more closely to make sure they're taking the right classes. So we started that program in early 2000s, and obviously the CSU system created something called California Promise that continues that graduation amongst the different CSUs on our campus. We have the undeclared population. So whether the university is undeclared, exploratory, undecided, on our campus, they're undeclared. So who advises them if they don't have a department to go to? So we've always advised undeclared students since, and like I said, we were the only advising office before. But probably, and Matt, correct me here, probably about 9, 10 years ago is when we started really exploding on our campus the amount of advisors we have in different colleges. In our campuses, we have 4 undergrad colleges, and then we're really focusing on in terms of the major advising. So we have professional advisors. I think we're up to maybe about just over 20 something total, about maybe mid 20s, 25 advisors on our campus. When I started in 2006 in this office, it was a total of 3 of us advising everyone. So sometimes as a director, I have to make sure I'm paying attention to that and not saying, hey, everyone, you can advise 500 students in the next 2 weeks, because that's probably what I used to do back in the day. So I'm careful when I do that. But at the same time, that's where it came from, Matt, in terms of the different programs. So the pledge program. Now we've expanded that, and you being the coordinator for our graduation pledge now, not only have we expanded it in terms of number of students, back in the early 2000s, maybe 10 students, maybe 20 students, maybe a cohort of 40 students. We're over 1,000 total students in the pledge program, not only for 4-year graduation, but for the transfer students. Now we have a 2-year graduation pledge program for them as well. So that's been helpful. But then the excessive unit students. So some people call them super seniors, but the proper term is excessive unit. And we've been monitoring those students, because one of the things that we realized, we had a good amount of students who were, what's the word we use in education here? Career students or professional students. They wanted to be a student for as long as they could for different reasons. Maybe it's so when we started looking at that, it wasn't so much about, I want more financial aid, I'm going to keep being. There may be a student or two like that, but it was really, I don't know if I'm confident enough to leave school yet and start my career. I don't know if I'm ready. And I think that's where we come in. Now, when we meet with excessive unit students, it isn't to say, hey, you've been here long enough, time to go. It's really, hey, why have you been here so long? I noticed you've changed your major a couple of times. Maybe we can assist on that. Maybe you don't need 3 majors. Maybe a minor in that is enough. So it's really a discussion, and really to give them the confidence. You are ready. Maybe an internship next semester so you feel more ready. Maybe having a conversation with someone, doing a shadowing with someone to give those students that confidence. So we work with those excessive unit students as well. And this year, we're starting to work with our first year students. We normally take in about 2,000 to 3,000 freshmen on every year, and about maybe 3,000 transfer students. So we're going to work with all the freshmen, all the first year students moving forward. And it's important. I mean, we have colleagues, and we have one actually, our location, Matt, you being an alumni of Educational Opportunity Program, EOP. They've been around in California for 50 years or more now. They've always met with students in their first year. It's important to do really intense, intrusive advising in the first year so they can understand things, so they can learn things, how to do things. So in the future, second, third, fourth years, it's not so much intrusive. It's when we see something, when we see a red flag, and we can bring them in and, hey, we notice you're off track. How do we help you? What do we need to do to get back on track? That's what we want to do in our office in terms of making sure. So that's why, I mean, Matt, in the last month and a half, we met with probably just a little over 1,500 students to make sure that we're all ready to register, not only for the next semester, but let's also plan out the next full year. Let's check in with them to see how they're doing. So all those pieces, they kind of relate, right? Every time we meet with students, it's only a 30-minute appointment right now, or during walk-ins or doing Zoom drop-ins or whenever they can. It's really to check in, meet them where they're at, and kind of guide that discussion in a way. It's unfortunate that advising seems to be a little bit more prescriptive than it used to be. I wish it could be more developmental. And I think it's finding that balance between giving the student what they need, but at the same time, asking open-ended questions that they might not be aware of, so they can start thinking about the other stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. And so Yeah, I mean, especially taking on first year advising, kind of had to readjust, but I think we've been making it work. And there's always room for improvement, a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, some of it might seem a little prescriptive, but with some of the first years, there's only so much that they might retain from orientation. So right now, it might seem a little bit more prescriptive, but we'll see in spring semester how it goes, and maybe we do get more of that developmental approach going.
But to connect to an earlier comment or question you had about different universities, I think it's wonderful that there's always a work in progress. How can we still make things better? I think if we ever get to a point where we think it's perfect, then maybe that's the time I retire. Don't they say retire at the highest point and go into the sunset? But no, I think it's great that we try to find things to improve. In 10 years, it's going to be a different generation of students, and we need to make sure we adjust to them. And I mean, I think our university has done a great job over the last few years where we're not blaming the students anymore. We're more of a, what's the word here, Matt? A student focused approach, a student centered as opposed to the school, or how do we used to say it? Are the students ready for school? How about, is the university ready for the students? And I think we've done a better job at that recently. And because of that, I think that's why our graduation numbers have gone up. I think that's why we have more impacted majors. That's why we're doing better, but there's still much more room, especially right now, what the focus is on the equity gaps. And our equity gaps for our school, when I say that, it's the URM population, so underrepresented minorities, our first generation students, our Pell Grant recipients. And then on our campus, we're also looking, there's an equity gap between males and females. Our males aren't doing as well as the females are doing in terms of graduation and retention and persistence kind of numbers.
Yeah, it's always looking at ways to improve. I had a guest on a couple of episodes ago, TJ, and they had said, like, essentially, like, if you believe yourself to be the expert, then you stop learning and stop growing. So it's always looking at yourself to, like, what can we do next? What can we improve on next? And you're talking about different institutions, and one of those is you go to NACADA conferences or an advising conference or a CalCan conference, and you get to meet other individuals from other institutions and go to their presentations, network with them, learn from them. That's essentially what happened in 2013 when I went to one of the NACADA conferences, and I went to a health science presentation, and they were talking about their students on probation and how they have like an independent study, and kind of took some of their information, brought it back, talked to you about it, and then we got to revamp our university studies independent study course, and also got to update some of the sophomore success course that our office also has. Can you talk more about the independent study and the course that we have?
I can. Before I go into those two courses that we've had, I want to make sure I say this. For those that have been listening to this podcast for some time, you probably have gotten to know Matt and his personality a little. But Matt didn't mention that in 2013, he was only on the job for maybe a few weeks, a month or two, when we said, let's go to NACADA, and he came, and he was new to advising. And to no surprise of any of you, Matt came back with ideas. Matt came back to how we can improve. When most folks that start with advising, let me get my feet on the ground. Let me get some balance here and learn some things. But we knew right away, let's take Matt to this NACADA conference. And I think it was here locally in LA area. I think USC might have hosted it. But we came back knowing, okay, Matt was the ideal candidate. Matt was the right person for us to hire because he already had all those ideas coming in. So I say that because I wanted to make sure everyone knew how wonderful and lucky we are to have Matt in our office. But yeah, one of the things is, I mentioned earlier, 30-minute appointments. And it's not that we can't make them longer, but how do we meet with all students as much as possible? At least back in 2013, when it was really just our advising office, right? And we see all the students on academic probation. On our campus, CSUSB, we have about 19,000 undergrad students. And quarter to quarter, now semester to semester, since we just switched to semesters, we typically have about 1,000 or just under 1,000 students on academic probation. Their university GPA or their cumulative GPA is below 2.0. So how do we meet with all those students in more than 30 minutes? So in those 30-minute appointments, we dig a little. What's the real reason that you're not doing well? We know it's not intelligence. It's something, right? Life is getting in the way, motivation, time management, financial reasons. There's many reasons students aren't doing good academically, and it's not because of an intelligence thing. So in those 30 minutes, we start digging, and hopefully we have an opportunity to meet with them again in the future. But if they get off academic probation, then they don't necessarily have to come in, because there's no more red flag in that sense. So one of the things we developed was, how can we meet with students longer than 30 minutes? The students that in that conversation, we know, okay, it's more than just a conversation. It's more than me just pointing them in a direction. A whole quarter with them, a whole semester with them, training them, showing them how to might be beneficial. So we have the 2 courses. Our USCD 2000 now in our semester system is a course where students can enroll in. It's only a 1-unit class now in the semester. So 15 hours total we have with them. And what are the basic things that we just talked about? How to deal with stress, motivation, time management, how to be organized. And guess what? These are all the things that, Matt, you mentioned earlier. These are the skill sets that aren't just going to make you successful in school, but these are the skill sets that can make you successful in your career later on, or multiple careers that you'll have later on. So the skill set is what we're trying to develop in that. But then there's some students who they need that individualized, not a classroom. And before I move on from the classroom, the other wonderful thing that we've learned from the classroom, because I've taught the class, Matt's taught the class, it kind of becomes like a cohort, like a group. They start sharing things with each other that probably are very private, they may have never shared otherwise, but they see that, hey, they look around the room and they're like, all of us are struggling. All of us have a reason. And when they start sharing their stories of why they're in the position they are in, they start realizing, some may say, you know what, maybe mine isn't that bad and I could do better. Or, you know what, I can relate to that. And they start. There was one time a student says, oh, I work at Disneyland and I work a lot of hours, and the drive, the distance. Disneyland's probably about an hour from our campus right now. They say, and that's why I struggle. That's why I haven't been paying much attention. I've been trying to focus on my career instead of finishing my education. By the end of that quarter, that student invited the whole class to Disneyland through his passes, through this, and they became, like I said, I wouldn't go as far as a family, but they really started depending on each other, and they can start trusting each other. And sometimes, as you know, students who are on academic probation is because they just haven't found someone enough to trust to start asking those questions that they probably should have asked before they fell on academic probation. So the other course, the individualized one, the USCD 27 that we've had, that one is, let's meet bi-weekly. So instead of just the 30 minutes once a quarter or once a semester, how about we meet bi-weekly? And it's more of a check-in. It's more us as an advisor holding them accountable to what they're doing in classes. So the first time we meet, we get a copy of their syllabus, and we hold on to it. So then when I see them in 2 weeks, I'm going to say, oh, I see that you have a test tomorrow. Are you ready for it? Have you prepared for it? How have you prepared for it? Having those discussions. Oh, I see that you just turned in an assignment. How did that go? Or have you gone to the writing center? Have you gone to the tutoring center to help you with some of these things? By the end, and it hasn't failed yet, and Matt, you can chime in here too, of the students that I've had in those individualized contracts or study contracts, at the end of every term, can I do this again next semester? Can I do this again next quarter, please? And of course, we say, of course, we don't need to sign up for the course anymore, but you're always welcome to come and check in with us. Percentage-wise, about 80-90% do much better. They start turning it around. And it's nice to see some of those students a couple years later when they're graduating and they come and give you a thank you card. Not that you were the different, but you were a maybe a spark, or maybe you said something that had made a difference for them. Goes back to that quote that I said, right? You made them feel different. You made them feel like they could do this. This isn't hard for them. But would you agree, Matt, on terms of the students that you've had in these classes before?
Yeah, I mean, and I think what's nice with the class is like it's a smaller class size. So we're looking at 12 on average, up to 20 max, but it gives a lot of individual time as well to the students, and they really get to be heard. Now, one of the assignments that I took, one of the class assignments I took from you was you did like the 101 things activity. Can you talk more about why you had that as one of your assignments for your students?
Yeah, at one time I had the privilege of carpooling with someone to work, and he not only was a director of our student life, our student engagement office, student leadership and development, we called it, but he was also a motivational speaker, going to universities, talking to students. And he wrote a chapter in a book one time, and it was about the 101 things, places, or people he wanted to meet, see, do, kind of thing, right? And I said, that's a good idea. I'm going to start doing this for the class. So as an assignment, it was, okay, write down 101 things that you either want to be, people you want to meet, or people you want, or places you want to go. And every student started writing things down. They would get stuck around number 20 or number 30, and they needed to write 101. And I look at them and I said, there's these to-do lists, right? And folks normally do to-do lists on a daily basis. And when you do a to-do list, it could be 5, 6 things. I'm asking you to do a to-do list for the rest of your life. So if you can find 5 or 6 things in a day, I'm sure you can find 101 things for the rest of your life. But it made them think about it. It made them start. And then towards the end of the semester, not at the beginning, but once they start feeling comfortable with each other, and once they build that rapport with each other, they're more than happy to share their list. Now, time-wise doesn't permit for them to read all 101, but they will read a good 20 to 30 of them in front of the class. And it would be neat to see a student say, you know what, one day I want to go jump out of an airplane. And it hasn't failed where another student might say, you know what, I worked there. And they'll connect them. And that's why I tell students, not only do you have to write it down, but you have to speak it out as well. Because when you speak it out, someone's going to be that network for you, be that connection for you. And it changes. The person I carpooled with, I always tease him about it. He goes, when he was a college student, he said, I'm gonna marry Holly Berry. that was on his 101 list. He said, now that I'm happily married, maybe I now change it to, I want to meet Holly Berry. And you change, obviously, as you guys all know, listening to this, our thoughts change, our interests change, and we can always modify it. But one of the good things about that 101 list, at least for that person that I was carpooling with, every year, one of the other things we do in society, we always have to come up with our New Year's resolution. What are we going to accomplish next year? Well, you have a list of 101 things. And every year he would go to it and, okay, I'm going to focus on these 3 or 4 or 5 things this year to make sure I do. So that's always neat. I still have my list. I wrote down a list. I have it at home and things that I want to accomplish. As Matt mentioned, this is one of the reasons I like to travel, because I like to accomplish some of these things. Great Wall of China is still on my list. But one of the things, and Matt knows this, one of my favorite things to do, or one of my number one on my list for a long time, was to run with the bulls in Pamplona, Spain. And I was able to do it when I was younger. I don't know if I can do it now, or if I want to, or if my wife will allow me to now, since my wife is more of an animal activist. So I don't know if I'll be able to anymore, but that was an accomplishment. But you have to write things down. You have to speak it out. You have to talk to people about it, not be ashamed of it, because these are your to-do lists for life. So it's a nice activity to do, and that was always a fun thing to hear from the students. Now I always preface it, keep it PG, because college students can take it in so many different directions, but they were pretty good at it.
Nice. Yeah. That was always a popular assignment. And, you kind of took things back full circle with your favorite quote. And I think this too kind of goes full circle with attending conferences or being in NACADA is you're able to borrow ideas from others, learn from others, bring it back to your institution, um, develop something or implement it and improve upon something. So in this case, got to take some of what we learned from the NACADA conferences, improve upon an independent study and a class that we had for our office for students. But then also we got to present on it as well at NACADA conferences and at our California advising conferences. So then able to share what we've learned based off that and then get to network with others. So it keeps going full circle, which is awesome.
And that full circle continues because as you know, for all those who presented, there's a lot of good questions that are asked in your presentation, and it leads to different conversations. It makes you think, okay, that was a good conversation we had in our presentation. How do we modify? How can we make better? It goes back to how can we still improve everything we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the last 6 years, you've been the director of advising academic services. So, as a director, like, what does your role entail?
So, as a middle manager, so when I first started in this office, it was in 06. And I don't know if this is across the country or across the world how this is going, but it seems like there's more layers than ever before. The director of advising back then reported to a dean of undergraduate studies, and they reported to the provost, who reported to the president. Now there's a couple more layers. I still believe this director position is ideal for me because I'm at the table where decisions are being made, but I'm also meeting with students and directly with them. Just last week, our advisors were full with appointments. So Ellie, who's the academic success coordinator, and I, well, you know what, there's still quite a bit of students and we want to make sure the registrar's signed. So let's do a lot of walk-ins. And just this morning, I met with another student who's hoping graduating next semester. So I'm still constantly meeting with students because I think that's very important to me in terms of that connection. And then that's what I enjoy, right? But I'm still, as a director, able to be at a table or in a discussion that's making decisions that can make a difference long-term for our students. But one of the main things as a middle manager, as I call it, is how do we receive information? How do we receive mandates, requirements, new strategies, new focuses, and translate that into how we're actually going to approach it? How are we going to meet these needs? How, from our lens, who are meeting with students, can we apply it? So that's one angle, right? But then from the other angle, always talking to you guys. And we always try, even when we're at home, we try to do this. And when I say at home, during the COVID time where our campus was closed and we were all working remotely from home, I always like to have think tanks amongst the staff. Hey, I just got this news. How do you guys think we should apply this, or how should we roll this out? And we have some seasoned folks in our office that give great opinions, great thoughts, and then together we make a decision. There's sometimes I have to make a decision more on the budgetary side, more on the personnel side, but any decision that's going to really apply to the students, I'm always trying to include all the advisors because that's important. And not only that, but one of the things as a director, I think it's important for me to always give opportunity wherever a staff member wants, needs, has asked for. With all the things that we coordinate, what are the things that you enjoy in pulling out your strengths, right? Matt is very organized. So anything that I need to make sure stays organized, Matt is someone I really think about all the time. But he has a lot of skill sets. Obviously, one of the things, and maybe Matt and I will have the discussion later, he's a great public speaker. He's great at presenting, but at the same time, maybe there's opportunity where he could be a public speaker for a presentation, for an orientation or anything. And that's something Matt can decide if he wants to do. Because I always want, like I said, I want advisors to feel that they're doing what they enjoy to do. Because as we all know, when people enjoy their job, they tend to work harder, and guess who it benefits? It benefits our students. If you're happy with what you're doing, the students will notice it, and that connection will be there. So that was a long-winded in terms of what my role is, but it's multiple in terms of the professional development for advisors as well. And I've said this to a lot of you. I will be more than happy to work for you when you pass me up in the positions, and I say pass me up not because I don't feel confident in myself, but I'm happy where I'm at. I've said this before. I saw my previous boss retire in this position, and I'll be more than happy to retire in this position as well. But I am also confident in the advisors that will tell me, Ed, I think it's time for you to retire early because you're not doing anything or you're not contributing much anymore. If I ever get to that point, that's when it's time for me to retire.
Well, and it's good that you feel fulfilled in this role and you see yourself in that role. I appreciate you saying I'm a good public speaker. I don't think I am. I like presenting, but not necessarily that I'm a good public speaker. But I appreciate either way. Now, you mentioned Ray and Ray Navarro, so the previous director, and let's talk about him. So he was the predecessor as director in advising academic services. Ray was someone who gave us our starts in academic advising. I know he was the first person that ever talked about NACADA and joining that organization. You mentioned seeing a lot of the previous kind of work that was there in NACADA. And so in Ray's office, that when you were cleaning out some of it, when he had retired, there was like these VHS tapes. There was like these older pieces of paper that were turning yellow that were typed on typewriters. If anyone listening knows what those typewriters are, but they had all academic advising type things from NACADA. But can you talk more about Ray Navarro and his influence on you?
You forgot to mention all those legal, very wide papers that were green and white.
Oh yeah, those two.
Those were the old queries that we can now run on our computers, and all those forms that we used to use to see who our students were and their GPA. We had requested from our IT department. They would give us those big legal forms with the white and green rows on it, right?
How far we have come in higher ed and technology.
No, but yeah. So as you mentioned, Ray Navarro, our previous director, gave us an opportunity to become who we become in terms of advisors, in terms of connecting. He was a big believer in what I believe in as well. The job can be taught, but the personality, the connection that we can have with students, that's what we need to choose in terms of who we're selecting. Not only was it Ray, when I first started here, we had a good seasoned advising group. It was Ray Navarro as our director, a lady named Diana Pelletier, who I became good friends with as well, and then another lady named Eloise Warnell, all wonderful advisors in terms of teaching me how to do things, learning from them. Ray Navarro always had this, and he said this a lot: family comes first, family first. And that's one of the things I try to do as well when folks need the time to spend with their family. I've never been one to deny a vacation or anything like that, because family does come first, and that way we're happy at work as well. So that's one thing that I got from him directly. But the other part is he was always looking at what else he can do. So NACADA was one of them in those early times of what can we do ahead of time, be more proactive than reactive, right? Towards the end, right before he retired, until the last few years before he retired, and he retired at a good age. He was still a young man, but he had worked in higher ed for quite some time. And here in California, we have a great pension, so he was able to retire at a good age. But he didn't just leave, and he left his mark by some scholarships that he started. So one of the things he did was, in all those years of working with students on probation, there was one thing that was a common factor to him, and it was financial. Students are struggling with school because maybe they're working two jobs, or the financial aid wasn't enough to pay for school or their books and so forth. So he started a resiliency scholarship fund for students on academic probation. Because if you know, scholarships, there's not many scholarships for students on probation. There's a lot of scholarships out there for students that are doing well academically, in terms of the public scholarships. So he started a scholarship for students who are struggling academically, and if they improve their GPA, they can apply for this scholarship, and it can help them financially. Not only that, but it's a nice pat on the back when you get a nice check that helps you, and you get a scholarship. Maybe for some of these students, their first scholarship that they applied to and received. But in order to raise that money, he started selling a lot of his own memorabilia. Since a young kid, he collected a lot of sports memorabilia, and he started selling it. Do people still use eBay, Matt?
I think they do. Yeah.
So eBay, he was selling a lot of things on eBay. He had his eBay account, and he would sell a lot, and he raised money, and that's how we would give scholarships to students. Dana Pelletier, the other advisor I mentioned, she was working on our campus. She was one of the first graduates in 1965 from our university, and she worked all the way till she could. She probably will still be working here. Unfortunately, due to some health issues, she passed away in 2012. And Ray renamed the Resiliency Scholarship to the Diana Pelletier Resiliency Scholarship. And when Diana passed, because they were both giving to students, Diana wrote that her car, all of her belongings, she would donate to this scholarship. So we were able to raise a good amount of money, and Ray and I moved things into storage, and then little by little, Ray was selling a lot of this stuff. So that's one of the wonderful legacies that he left behind in terms of Diana Pelletier. And we still have that scholarship, and every semester we still award that scholarship to students who are struggling academically. When he retired, it wasn't enough that he made a difference in our students and he created a scholarship. He and his wife created a second scholarship for undocumented students. He wanted to help undocumented students who had earned their bachelor's be able to attend a graduate program at our university. So he donated from his own pocket, his own money, him and his wife, created that scholarship, and that's something we're supporting now and selecting students to go to grad school. And that's the Soñador Dreamer scholarship by Ray Navarro and his wife Jeannie. So another thing, not only did he make a difference while I was here, but post-retirement, he also made a difference. And I always saw him from a distance before I worked in the office. I was fortunate enough to work with them for so many years, and very impactful in my life. Unfortunately, Ray also passed away this last year because of COVID. And we still stay in contact with his wife Jeannie, and Jeannie's still very supportive of the scholarship. So yeah, that's the Ray I knew. And the other thing, he didn't seem to stress. Matt, you and I talk about this a lot. These positions, these jobs can sometimes stress us out, and they're not supposed to. We're supposed to be enjoying these jobs. And one of the things I learned from him, he got his job done, and at 5:00, he felt good to go home on time and not feel like he needed to stay longer. And that's what I try to do too. And obviously that's a commitment I made to myself, to my wife, that I'm not taking work home, and I need to make sure that work-life balance stays good for my health, for the health of the office too, make sure things are getting done. But I learned that from him. Not take life so serious, not take work so serious, and just we can do our best, and as long as we keep wanting to do our best and keep working on improving, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, he definitely had a way about himself, very chill, and someone that definitely everything he did was always, how does this not benefit me, but how does this benefit the students? How's this going to impact someone in a positive way? So someone that he probably would never have called himself humble, but was very humble, and someone that was hardworking. And I always heard stories of like when he first started, very much like kind of this student activist. And I mean, he created the university studies class that we have in our office. So very much someone that was a pioneer and someone that really made an impact on many, many people.
The other thing, and I forgot to mention this, and he was, I don't even know if ahead of his time, but About 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I talked about how we started getting more advisors, not only in the different colleges, but in athletics, international, even some of our student affairs colleagues like veteran affairs, um, undocumented center. He started University Academic Advising Council, what we call in short UAC. So on our campus, we have a council. It was homegrown. It wasn't a charge from president or cabinet to create this council to make decisions. It was, how do we communicate with each other? How do we make sure all the information from our registrar's office about our credit summaries and about graduation and our catalog is being disseminated to all advisors? Because Ray was the director of the one office, but then not of the other advisors. So he said, how about we always meet on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, on a semester basis? And as you see, and you've seen this more in Nakata, more and more universities, if not all, probably have some kind of council now. And within that council, now a professional development has grown out of that, right? So that was something that Ray thought of years as we were hiring. He goes, we should create a council to make sure everyone's on the same page. So that was wonderful from him too.
Yeah, again, thinking of what's going to benefit the students. Hey, bring us all together so we can actually communicate. And so, yeah, a lot of thanks to Ray and a lot of things that he started here at this university. But we've reached time. I know there was other things that we were planning to discuss, and maybe there'll be a part 2 for this. But if anyone has any questions, maybe it's about scholarships or about academic probation or about being a director or how to become an academic advisor, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
My email. Our phone, I don't know if this is the good thing or not, but usually my extension isn't what's on the website, just because I want to make sure someone answers. If I'm meeting with the student, I'm trying to focus on the student. I don't want to lead someone straight to a voicemail. So our front counter, our wonderful staff there, whether it be Randy or Janet or someone, has always been able to answer the phone and direct people or put people on my calendar if we need to make a meeting or appointment. But my email, I'm always constantly checking that email. And my email is my first initial E and my last name, Mendoza. So I'm sure Matt will put it somewhere. Or emendoza@csusb.edu is my email. emendoza@csusb.edu.
All right, awesome. And I appreciate you every day and you being the boss and having us, work as hard as we do, and also just appreciate being academic advisors here at this university and in this office. So I know once we end here, we got more students to see. It's peak registration time. So Ed, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. And I appreciate you inviting me.